some foolish people out here who look at their personal relations with white folk. And they have good white friends. And I'm not doubting the sincerity of the friendship. Not at all. Not at all. I do not doubt that blacks and whites can be truly friendly. And we should be friendly as people. And I don't see any problem with having those friends, you know. But do not confuse your personal relations with the relations between groups. Do not always assume that the dynamics that determine your personal relationships are the same dynamics that can be used between groups. That's a serious error that a lot of people make. I live by the code, that's my eye. Whipping vegan food up in my pot. Why they claim I ain't the ruling? Cause I'm listening to Hollywood.
Peace, everyone. Thank you for joining in. I'm Geechie Motivator, as you know. I'm here with my sister. I will let her introduce herself before we get started, and then we'll get started with the discussion.
Peace, everybody. Shawna Murray-Browne here. I'm a liberation-focused community healer trained as a social worker. I used to hold space in integrative psychotherapy for Black folks, centering the needs of Black children first, Black women, and those of us working for the liberation of Black people. Central to my work in these times, now that we are navigating this space around this pandemic, my work looks like educating other therapists on how to decolonize their therapy practice and working with large institutions that say they're doing work for Black folks and actually fortifying them on what it means to decolonize their practice and ensure that they're not harming us. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Appreciate you. So we're talking about healing in the Black community in particular, African community. Our first question is kind of like sometimes a question that people finish with, but could you tell us some books that have been a big instrument in your healing, and tell us a little bit about some of those books?
Oh, okay. We're about to set the stage right now. I can't ready though, y'all. I can't ready. He gave me a warning. All right. So I have a few. I have a lot of books, y'all, but one of the books that really impacts my work and has really fortified in my own healing and understanding around what it means to do this community healing work in a way that amplifies our Africanness is Dr. or Mama Marimba Ani, Let the Circle Be Unbroken. What I appreciate deeply about this book is she really holds the space for us to re-acknowledge and re-identify with our Africanness. Things like having rhythm, things like our original ritual traditions, and being able to identify the way they show up in our sort of everyday, quote, American life here on this land, and being able to ensure that the circle isn't unbroken, right? Another book that's been my favorite lately is called Mojo Working by Dr. Katrina Hazard Donald. So a lot of my work over the last 2 years has really been around rooting and grounding in how have Black folks always healed? That's been really the question I've been asking myself since I started doing my work. But when I'm really sort of grounding in what were the ways that specifically those of us, people of African descent, and that have ancestors who were enslaved here in the United States, what were our healing ways? And Dr. Katrina Hazard Donald helps us to be able to find ourselves and locate ourselves in the spiritual and religious tradition of hoodoo, and recognizing how our brilliant ancestors were able to fortify our spiritual healing ways, even in the midst of enslavement. This has been particularly healing for me lately. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I got a couple more. Okay. Another one is post-traumatic slave syndrome. I mean, I don't know how you could be watching this channel and not know, but maybe you ain't know. So post-traumatic slave syndrome, Dr. Joy DeGruy is the bomb. She the bomb. And what she really did is she really grounds and fortifies us in understanding concretely the relationship between our enslavement and how it shows up present day. So in case you're unclear, or you are unsure around how is it that this stuff is still impacting us, she lays it out for us and offers some groundedness in what we need to be doing right now. We got Finding Soul on the Path to Orisha, a West African spiritual tradition. What I love about this book, and those of us that are familiar with our African spiritual traditions, I am an Iya Orisha. And so in my grounding and work and relationship to the ancestors and to the Orisha, this book was really dope, because instead of just learning, oh, this is what Eshu be about, this is what Yamaya be doing, this is what Oshun is about, this sister Tobe Malora Correal, what she does is she brings about a really grounded exercise on what it means to apply this in our spiritual life. And then I got two more for you. Okay. This book called Unfuckable With. Yes, she said it. Unfuckable With. Sister Catrice Jackson is the bomb. And this book is really dope because it really helps for the sisters to be able to ground ourselves in the everyday problems that we have, and then helps us to acknowledge and recognize our ancestral lineage and healing. And then the very last book that I will amplify is mine, because I got to. So I wrote this book called Return to Presence, a liberatory workbook in mind-body healing for change makers and human service professionals. So I am one who has been holding healing space for Black folks, for brown folks, for indigenous folks, and folks of color generally. And I can't do that right now. So I wrote a book to be able to fortify the healing spaces that I'm holding virtually. And so I teach around how you can actually get some tool where you can identify some of the lineage traumas that you've experienced and actually work on them. I introduce us to the concepts around meditation, but from ancient perspectives around how our emotions lodge themselves in the body and why it's important for us to be able to do this work. And I even sort of do some stuff for us to be able to learn our own emotions, right? Like, ain't nobody got time for us to be like, I'm feeling some type of way. Like, what is the way that you feel, boo? Like, and so my workbook paired with a healing platform that I created is a really awesome tool. And we can talk about where you can get that later.
So I didn't tell her about the book recommendations, and she came prepared, but she also moved in a way that it feeds into our conversation. So one of the books, Let the Circle Be Unbroken, and our mama, or Nana Marimba Ani, creates terms for us to be able to describe our situation. And so my next question is, and I'm glad that you even brought up your book. My next question is, can you briefly explain the Mayafa effect on us, and then other words that we could use to describe our situation or conditions?
So, I mean, that's a really big question. So, this is the kind of thing that I like hold down and hold like 16-hour trainings, but we ain't got time for that. So when I'm thinking about the Ma'afa's effect on us, I think I'm going to start first with our worldview. All right. I'm going to center on the fact that we have been continually indoctrinated with this white-centered framework and of understanding or seeking to understand what's happening in the now. And so we have disconnected ourselves from our Africanness. And so the lens with which we look at our whole life around, the lens with which we seek to do any sort of critical assessment, if not reoriented, it is the Ma'afa being able to live, to be seen throughout our day-to-day experiences. The Ma'afa has transformed the way that we engage and have our concept around our genuine relationships, right? It has sought to dismantle and destroy our concepts of the Black family. And we understand that the Black family is one of the foundational imperative. And so what the Ma'afa sought to do and has successfully done in some ways, and we need to continue to do our healing work in order to dismantle it, but it has impacted our ability to be able to engage healthily as parents with our children. You know, we are often reenacting violence on our children because of the assault that that white folks and their ancestors have enacted upon us. It has shattered the concept of trust between the Black man and woman. It has reoriented our perspective around how we can even see ourselves and engage on a holistic perspective. It has dismantled and disrupted our connection to the earth as it exists in and of itself. As in, we don't even know where our food come from. Half of us don't even put our hands in the ground. Like, what's going on? We have absorbed Abrahamic spiritual traditions, so it has made it such that we see things from the perspective of a white Jesus, and instead of being able to see not only the divine in ourselves, and really ground and root in the connection to our ancestors and nature. We have to work through this work in order to address all of that. I mean, that's a little bit. I know you got more.
That's cool. So if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, hit the share and invite some people in. If you have any questions or responses, you can definitely chime in. My next question. So when we think about our environment and when we hear, it's like this constant anti-African environment, right? Whether it's work, school, medias, watching TV, whatever. How do you advise us, especially if we're trying to heal, how do you advise us to exist in those spaces that's always anti-African?
I think that we have to find pro-Black, unapologetically Black. We have to find and cultivate, because those things are not the same, right? So you might identify or be able to sort of root yourself in communities and organizations that are African centered, but you also have to cultivate genuine and deep relationships so that you can fortify a sense of village. As I was thinking about our time together, I was thinking about my own personal experience, right? Like for me, I prayed a lot, really requested elder guidance in my journey. And had I not done that, had I not had that level of elder guidance and continue to fortify those relationships, I think that I'm sure I wouldn't be the Black woman that I am today. And so rites of passage and establishing sort of elder and village relationships is chiefly important, because we need to re-Africanize ourselves. We need to decolonize and re-Africanize our perspectives. We need to be around and we need to set new boundaries around, what's acceptable and what's not. If your focus is on the liberation of Black people, then the way you move is going to look different. The priorities that you have are going to be different. The decisions that you make about your children, right? So we need to be making decisions about what we're pouring into our children in order to ensure that we are really careful, right? Like, am I going to send my child to this institution that is teaching anti-Black and anti-Africanness on a day-to-day experience? What kind of decisions will I make for myself? How will I recreate my lifestyle and my livelihood to be in alignment with what it means to amplify an African existence? And we have to do this in a way that we are fortifying village and relationship, or we will often feel like we are doing something incorrect, right? Because everything around us is amplifying the falsehood of white supremacy.
So I'm pretty sure you can think of a bunch of anti-African things. And there's some things that we probably, right, some things we probably won't consider or even acknowledge that as anti-African. But one of the things in particular, and I'm glad that you mentioned the Abrahamic ideology or Abrahamic worldview. Mm-hmm. I want you to speak a little bit more to the stigma around our African spiritual practices, rituals. How do you begin to start to decolonize that stuff of having a stigma against that?
So this is really interesting. So in my own personal experience, I was raised, of course, Baptist, Christian, and I do want to sort of amplify, because I think it's really important for us to get clear that even in our spiritual practices, those of us that that may identify as Christian, the way that Black folks show up as Christian ain't the same way that other people be talking about Christianity. So many of the richness and resilience of our people still rings true, but it is important for us to be able to re-identify and be able to see the aspects that are truly African. For me, I had to start asking some really tough questions. And the beginning was pretty basic, right? Like, how is it that it might be good for me to be able to fortify my understanding of my spiritual knowing in a practice that upheld the oppression of my people, right? The church itself was instrumental in enslaving my people. And so I had to begin first in asking the really basic question: what was the function of this spiritual tradition that I'm grounding myself in? What was its function? Does it have any function in my liberation? And so once I got to a point where I was hard pressed to be able to identify any aspect of liberation, and not just, there are churches that are feeding the people, like they got community programs, right? And there are a couple, I mean, like I can I can name one, and I know there's a couple of churches that are getting more clear about the inherent Blackness and Africanness, even in those spiritual traditions. But it began first with me getting clear about the difference between working for a concept of social justice and working for Black liberation. Liberation being that, are you trying to shatter the systems that seek to oppress us, or are you trying to do some harm reduction that somehow makes it less harmful? And so for me, it meant that I had to begin with a book. I don't have the book in front of me, but the book Sacred Woman. I began with the book Sacred Woman. I did that with a bunch of other sisters. I did it a few damn times. I did it a couple times. And then I started to ask questions and get curious about some of the original spiritual ways and knowings, and found those in the community. So I started to go to sacred circles. I started to go to an Ile, right, which is a spiritual house for the Yoruba tradition of Ifa. I went to Egypt, or Kemet, and I studied alongside the book A Sacred Woman and tried to sort of, I juxtaposed those histories with the wisdoms of our people. And so in order for us to begin to decolonize that, I think we have to have a certain level of truth and fortified knowing around the fact that, history itself will let you know the pathway to go. And then the last thing, I think reconnecting with our ancestors, chiefly important, right? So anybody who got a grandma or grandfather who you walk in the house, a grandma's house, and you see a whole wall of pictures of everybody and them, that is a very sort of forward representation of an ancestral altar if it's folks that have transitioned. And that practice alone of sitting not only at the feet of my elders and asking questions, but sitting with and honoring my bloodline ancestors, those that come in love and light, was really helpful for me in continuing to fortify and decolonize my perspective around spirituality. And then the last thing I'll say, is getting outside, right? And so, what Sacred Woman really held the space for, and is written out excellently. And I encourage any sister, brother too, but every sister to pick that book up, is she outlines how we can reconnect with the elements, right? Like be with the tree, go and sit in the water, go commune with the land, go acknowledge and honor the earth, and study nature to be able to figure out a powerful and enlightening spiritual reflection for ourselves.
Love it. So I'm gonna probably get you some enemies right quick by answering this question. And I'm gonna throw your alley hoop anyway.
All
so
right.
Brother Antoine, my brother from South Carolina, says, do you think that sports is anti-African? And before you answer that, my alley hoop is capitalism is anti-African. Go ahead.
Okay, so we're gonna have to parse this out a bit. So first of all, capitalism is a tool of settler colonialism and imperialism all over the globe. It has only harmed African peoples, and it is completely anti-African. Now, sports in of itself, so soccer or football, like these activities are not inherently anti-African, and that they come from the wisdoms of our people. So you playing a sport to fortify or to establish community, to establish powerful relationship, to do your healing work, to release, that's not anti-African. But the infrastructure, the institutions that have been built specifically for the continued enslavement and monetary earnings off of Black life is absolutely anti-African, y'all. Like, what you mean? White people out here getting all these coins off our backs? Absolutely. Brother, he knew that.
So
that was an excellent question, but I feel like anyone who when we begin to develop a sense of critical consciousness, and we are rooted and foundational, we have a foundational understanding of what it means to ground ourselves in an African-centered awareness, then the way you look at the world is completely different. In what ways is the Ravens helping Black liberation? It ain't. And then even if we look at the brothers that are playing this sport, right? In what ways are they able to function as sovereign beings? Right? Like, come on, you know. I mean, what's happening to Serena Williams? I mean, every sport, you know. Come on, Antoine.
I love it. You love the answer. I love the answer. That was a dope alley hoop that you dumped in. I appreciate that. So when you're thinking about healing, and then I think about growth, and there's this thing of like you're never gonna stop growing. Like you probably should never stop growing. I should say. Is there ever a time when you can actually become whole? Like when you're healing, is there a time to reach wholeness? Will you ever reach wholeness, or is it just like a ongoing thing?
That's a really good question. So a funny story that's actually not funny when I think about it. And this is going to be a really powerful, a really literal example of my own personal growth. I was on a radio show. I want to say maybe it was like 7-8 years ago. And I was talking about my experience and seeking to do healing work around my relationship with my mama. And I said, I'm healed, y'all. I'm healed. Whole time, my mama issues ain't ended, right? We understand that we have generational traumas that we are still working on a day-to-day basis. So to answer your question, can we ever achieve wholeness? I think that answer is yes and no. What I'm saying is, in this present time where we are under constant attack, it requires us to be fervent in our commitment to our healing journey and to prioritize that almost just as much, if not more, than we prioritize anything else. Doing the healing work while cultivating a warrior mentality is important for us to recognize that we are very literally at war. And folks are not utilizing these terms, but there is an active genocide. They're seeking to make genocidal action on African people, and not just here in the United States, but globally. And so it is unfortunate that I can't say that in my lifetime or in my child's lifetime, unless we do some real powerful turn up and we start actually enacting many of the things that since at least the 1940s that our ancestors have been telling us, I don't see us achieving full wholeness on this particular land until we are able to cultivate and fortify our own spaces where we can exist and protect our institutions. Was it Amos Wilson who wrote in Blueprint for Black Power? It was a clear sort of outline of what would be needed for us to be able to fortify a true liberatory experience. And I would say that not until we get very clear about that and start to enact the things necessary for that existence will we be able to truly epitomize a sense of wholeness. Now, the other part of my answer was yes. And what I mean by that is when we start to really ground ourselves in a spiritual understanding in the ways that our ancestors know it to be, right? Recognizing the sort of multiplicity of perspectives, right? So that is, if we do some research around the Gullah Geechie, right? And we do some research around the our lineage relationship to like the Bakongo. We start to get really grounded in how our ancestors and spiritual traditions understood this perspective of wholeness. And if we go beyond the physical experience, but root ourselves in a spiritual knowing, then I will say, yes, you can get to a space from a spiritual perspective where perhaps you achieve a sense of wholeness.
Okay, appreciate it. So, in these activities that may promote healing, I want to talk a little bit about fasting or resetting. So we think about the body, the mind, the community, in whole. What's your thoughts around and advice around fasting and kind of detoxing?
Yeah, I think that it is fundamental to our existence, and oftentimes when we think about fasting, we think of it only for food, and I do think that fasting, and from a nutritional perspective, is really important to provide the sort of physical manifestation of restoration for our bodies. But I also believe in fasting from really all of the things external from that which our ancestors and the creator gave to us, right? So fasting from social media, fasting from whiteness, fasting from consumption of really all of the things. I think that the primary way to be able to gain access to the highest form of spiritual insight and guidance from our ancestors is when we get to a space of calm, of deep awareness, of silence, so that we can push out all of the noise and the chatter and distraction and really focus in on what our highest existence is. So yes, I think that fasting is important. And I also think that this is something that is best achieved in collective, because then we are building in that sense of accountability and villagehood, brotherhood, sisterhood, and camaraderie, and that we need, especially in these times.
So one of the things that I've been seeing, and this is probably going to be I got a follow-up question after this. I'm going to ask this question, and there's going to be a follow-up to this.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I've been seeing, as well as, mental health is being something that we talk about more, but Black leaders are, even from a business standpoint, creating these healing spaces. And it's become not only is it popular, things, but I mean, it's accessible, it's available. How important is that? How important is that to our liberation and just healing in general?
So, I'm always given a nuance. So the person who's holding the space or organizing it matters. The intention behind the healing space, holding the healing space matters, right? Because not all of us are holding healing space with the intention or even envisioning any aspect around true transformation, empowerment, or liberation. For example, I know many folks that are practitioners like myself that are providing, quote, therapy in a European sense, that might be holding healing space simply to support us in coping with the current status quo. That is, to help us to not react so alarmingly to the atrocity that is the slaughter of our people, right? And so that I think that the function of it and the ability to be able to identify who's doing what and what the intention is and whether or not it's really rooted in our collective liberation is important. But from a broader perspective, of course, Black folks holding healing space and normalizing it is very important. I think that it is also really important for us to get clear about the fact that our people have always held healing space, but not just in a space called healing space, right? In our homes, in our relationships, in our families, like that needs to be, that should always be the intention. And so I would also say, when we're to question that term, even, right? Black leaders, like, who are you considering a leader? Who are they accountable to? who are their elders, and do they have a track record of being able to produce what they say they're seeking to produce. I think all of those things are important, but on a grand scale, yes, us coming into our awakening and knowing about the value of healing space is an imperative for us.
So I'm glad you made the point about leadership. We talked about in one discussion how for some reason we expect our leaders not to go through a fire or be critiqued, and they just kind of get the trophy for just showing up. So that's important. Antoine brought up sports, and that made me think of and coming to terms with that a lot of Black folks practice sports as a method of escaping the reality, right? And so sometimes with healing, there's this notion that people can kind of like be focused on that and not have to deal with, what's going on. So it's kind of a twofold question. At what point do this concept of like doing healing work or self-care work becomes escapism in a bad way? And could we be simultaneously fighting but also healing? Is that like a
Yeah, so I actually sit with this a lot. I think that it is important for us to recognize that the level of trauma that many of us are enduring is something that most other folks likely would not still be here after and as a result of. And so when we're talking about the impact of post-traumatic slave syndrome and this perpetual sort of psychic attack on our existence and ability, we need a break. It is important for us to be able to identify or seek a sense of balance that is hopefully informed by listening to your body, right, and communing with your spirit guides. Likewise, though, yes, I think many of us in rootedness in this white perspective, this white value system, we treat self-care just like any other act of consuming, right? So if you are simply buying up all the quote massages and it's just to get away, that's not going to have the same effect as communing with your body prior to going into the massage session and letting your body know that it's okay to release the trauma that's been stored in your muscles, right? And so I think that there's a fine line. I think that many of us have to be honest about the impact of these traumas on our psyche, and recognize that some of us we aren't all built the same. We don't all have the same skill set to or endurance for this level of thing. But absolutely, it can anything too much of anything is bad. And that's even too much of a fighting, right? If all you think is fight, at some point your body is simply going to break down in you. There's some research that's been done specifically for Black folk around, you know how we know Black don't crack. Whole time we are aging at an accelerated rate. If you look up the John Henryism, the Superwoman schema, or you Google the weathering hypothesis, there's actual data that shows that we are literally dying at a faster rate because we won't stop. And so it is true that those extremes on either end only contribute to our demise.
So I'm going to merge this statement and the long question that Joy had. But this idea of healing, cultivating this warrior mentality, people who are ready to fight for our liberation. But this person, Joy, Miss Joy, how you doing, Joy, had a concept, and I've heard this so many times, and I actually think of healing when this happens, but sometimes we depend on celebrities, right? Not knowing why they're celebrities and what they're creating.
They play a function, yeah.
But we want them, we expect them, or we want to like not burn bridges or whatever, so that they will take that money and help us. Like, do you see that as some kind of actually, just what's your general thoughts about like this notion that celebrities are going to help Black people become liberated within one.
I think it's really important for us to get clear about the function of celebrity in this white society. I think that it's a gift when we got black folks that are in that position that also know who they are. You know what I'm saying? Because it amplifies and fortifies and educates the mass of our people who may not be clear or even know where to look for guidance. But certainly it's great when folks seek to do that if they're doing it on their own accord, if they actually have an established relationship and community and are not further supporting whiteness and the myth of white supremacy throughout this experience. I really wanted to see that question. Can you put it back up? I want to, what was said? It was really long. I see your point, but at the same time, we're not able to use those millions of dollars to make our own league or use it as a platform for Black liberation. Okay, so who has the money and the platform to create institution? Okay, so, all right. So, okay, so a couple things. So first, I think it's really important for us to reassess our framework and our perspective around what success is, right? So I wasn't saying that we need to create our own football league. I didn't say that. I was saying that by doing the athletic activity, you know, that is good for our bodies and that came from our ancestry as it is. On the other hand, though, I also think that it's really important to acknowledge that we've been out here trying to create our own institutions. We've been out here creating our own institutions. And oftentimes I think that we get, because the main media seeks to ensure that we don't see those things, and things like Facebook even have algorithms to ensure that you see the same of whatever you looked for before. I think it's important to recognize that we do have greatness in our communities that are establishing institutions and infrastructures. However, I think it's important that we are ensuring that we're not seeking to recreate that which white institutions have created, because we would just be engaging within the same systems that have sought to oppress us. And so, sure, we could, create a football league. And there may be someone, I'm sure there probably is. Actually, now that you said, I might have to Google that later. There might be somebody Black that's brilliant that then created their own. But recognizing that when we do create our institutions, we have to do this both and thing of figuring out to what extent am I engaging with the day-to-day system, the system of capitalism, the system of oppression in order to feed my family for the now, versus what planning and strategy is happening in community and village, preferably with the guidance of an elder that has been there, done that, so we don't repeat the same things and we can sankofa the things that are actually supportive. How can we create something new? I think it has to be a both and. Yeah, I hope I addressed that comment.
Yeah, I have this a lecture, and eventually it's going to turn into a book, and it's titled "Real." It's an African-centered critique to African progress in America. So that "Real" is breaking down to REAL, and then it talks about us focusing too much on representation instead of expiation, and too much on ameliorations instead of liberation, right? And so this concept of building your own and all that other stuff, sometimes it puts us in a space where we misinterpret success. Yes. So this Black athlete or this Black actor who now gets to be in this movie playing this cop, that's representation for us, and economically it helped none of us, right?
Right. Was it Dr. Jared Ball released the book, The Myth of Black Buying Power, right? Yep. Like if we are really, or all right, somebody go and they get accepted at Harvard University and we're like, oh my gosh, yeah. The whole time it's like, hold up, okay, let's get clear. Okay, what's the function of this? Sure, let's celebrate this young person's achievement, and let's ensure that if they're going to go in that war zone that's going to seek to eradicate all aspects of remnants of Blackness within them, that we also fortifying that person to be able to still have whole aspects of themselves. And listen, I'm speaking from experience. I am currently a PhD student in a very, very white, very, very racist institution. And I'm crystal clear about who I am accountable to, what I'm doing it for, and what I'm saying when I'm in there. But the only reason I'm able to do it without losing myself is because I'm being held accountable by folks in community, and I'm being protected because I say some stuff that otherwise could get me kicked out. And so, redefining our definition of success can be, if we, all right, here's a book. Okay, it's a little busted. The cover page is gone, but the title is African Black Psychology in the American Context. It's by Dr. Baba Kobe Kambone. There's a picture. Okay, and so when we're seeking to assess, to what extent are my concepts of success and alignment with an African-centered perspective or those that are rooted in whiteness, all we got to do, let me see if I can pull it up. Oh, because I have it saved. We can look at Diop's two cradle theory of European and African worldview, right? We can cite Dr. Edwin Nichols on the philosophical aspects of cultural difference, right? And if you just look, right, when we look at athletes and we're grounding ourselves in this concept of success that is deeply connected to our concept of healing, are we looking for tangible things? Or are we looking for these sort of celestial and deep connection to spirit, right? One is white. And the other one celebrates our Africanness and our Blackness, right? And so I think using some of these tools will help us when we are asking these questions.
Antoine said we need a real Wakanda.
But see, the thing is that this is relevant when we're talking about community healing. An issue that I believe that we on a day-to-day struggle with is this concept of trust and accountability within our community, right? So, there are folks I'd be like, dang, I really want to be deep with them. Like, I really want to be in whole time village with them. But this thing that they did and this thing that they did is a deal breaker for me. And are they willing to have this conversation, or are they going to be like who she thinks she is? Right? None of us, because of the impact of settler colonialism, because of the impact of the Ma'afa, our concept of even village is all jacked up. Where's our village about to be? Who about to be the elder panel? Like where are we gonna have our who's gonna hold us accountable? And without that infrastructure and apparatus, with everyone trying to do the same thing at the same time and not being able to join on some grounding value systems while also healing and acknowledging we got some issues, right? Like there was a brother who was amplifying this sort of conversation around the need for us to just agree that we're going to be about Black people, right? And if all the Black people could just come together and be like, yes, I'm going to center Blackness. It's like, yeah, but if we look at history, what history has told us is that hasn't worked, because when we center only Blackness and we don't acknowledge the harms that have been done to Black women and children and folks across the gender binary, that has always been a thing that we can't get with, right? Like we can't accept human beings for their whole selves. We aren't protective of each other, no matter our identities. And that gets in the way of trust building. It gets in the way. And I think that if we can't build our Wakanda, if we can't get to some of the ground level deal breakers and heal those, and it's going to be uncomfortable as F. Like we're going to be mad.
Right.
But we have to be able to work with people we don't like, but love them enough in our Blackness to be able to do the work so we can move forward for our children.
Love it. So we're going to be wrapping up in 15 minutes. So make sure you get your questions in the comments, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. I appreciate you. So I want to go to this concept of race-based stress. I want to know your understanding about it or of it, and then some solutions, right? So some people probably won't even acknowledge or comprehend that a stress that they have is literally race-based.
Mm-hmm.
But can you talk a little bit about it, your understanding, and then some solutions.
Certainly. So I'm gonna. I mean, y'all probably know by now if you've been watching me like that. I'm going to share a couple different perspectives, and then I'm gonna bring it together. So the term race-based traumatic stress or race-based trauma has been studied by Dr. Robert Carter. I believe he is located in New York. He created the specific term in the research in the ivory tower as in an effort to be able to use these terms to be able to advocate for Black folks when we went to court. In order to be able to advocate for reparation and correctness. And so the definition that he put forth was to appease white folks and white systems so that we could get the freedom necessary for Black folk, for brothers and sisters and Black folks and that were experiencing the court system. And so race-based traumatic stress is defined by Dr. Carter centers like a specific specific event that was clearly racist that caused distress or, overwhelm, unable to function, that kind of thing. When I think about race-based stress or trauma, I think of it from not really an individual perspective. I think of it from a collective and historical trauma perspective. In what ways have we endured the systems of oppression? How has it led to what Baba Wakasa Mazimoyo calls injected inferiority, which is when you take on the perspectives of what white folks think of you and you begin to embody it. For example, our concept of and this would actually be race-based trauma when I'm talking about trauma being some lasting impact on you that shows up on an ongoing experience, or race-based stress could be a short-lived experience where, somebody called you a nigger and you went OFF, right? Or something happened to your child in school where the teacher, had them do an assignment that was racist. And it's impacting their concept of themselves, right? So all of these sort of experiences do have different terms to describe them so we can delineate them when we're trying to advocate within the white system. But when I think of race-based stress, I'm thinking, how has racism negatively impacted the material conditions and the emotional and spiritual acknowledgement of us as Black people? And then when we're talking about how do we address it, right? We address it by centering Blackness in every sense of the word. So for our children, being really intentional about the books that they read and that they only see themselves. Like, I'm really clear, folks in my family have gotten so mad at me because if you give me some white girl doll, I'm throwing it away. Like, it's going in the trash. Like, the books, right, need to amplify. We need to amplify the brilliance of Blackness. The people around us need to be centered. For adults, we need to be able to assess our concept of self, like questioning everything, right? Why do I wear my hair this way, right? Why do I think that sisters that sisters that are dark skinned aren't beautiful or look better? Let me question my preference. And then I think being in healing circles are really important. So, what I do, I'm teaching embodiment, right? Like, how can we get back in our bodies, reclaim ourselves, communicate with our bodies, breathe? How can we use things like Qigong, that's Qigong, a traditional Chinese form of meditation that does have some African root. And in its relationship of the sanctity of African healing modalities, or Kemetic yoga, African dance, drumming. How can we use these things to be able to dislodge the long-lasting traumatic impact of race-based trauma on our people? And I think that it is complex and holistic. But it doesn't have to be complex, though. When I talk about it, it probably sounds like it is, but it is actually, it's pretty holistic, right? It's like establishing relationships with folks that are centering healing, in the experience, doing ongoing reflection around your familial relationships and the ways that you feel and think about yourself, learning or remembering. What I say, is I'm trying to help you remember how to heal yourself. So that book, those two books, the one, Return to Presence, right? Like helps you gives you some tools to help you remember how you heal yourself, because one of the chief intentions of the white establishment has been to make us forget. When we start to look at mojo working, right, it helps us to connect. Instead of having to go 600 years back, what does it just look like the last couple of generations, so that we can get clear. Oh, so like, what is it, the ring shout, right? What are we learning about? What can we remember about the ways that we've always healed, and then enact them now? And that's what I believe we need to do in order to heal from race-based stress and race-based trauma. And all of that is to remember our original ways of knowing, and to be around other people that are doing that thing as well. And then the last thing I'll say about that specifically is the importance, again, of communing with the earth, right? Really establishing and getting in rhythm with Great Mother, really grounding and understanding our relationship to the moon, really listening to what the earth has to say, gardening, putting your hands in the dirt. Actually, data shows, y'all, it helps to alleviate depression, right? And so all of the things that we ain't had this fancy data to affirm, our ancestors were naturally doing, because we're brilliant.
Yeah, I love it. To curve a little bit of, I know you say representation and having certain images, but how do you suggest curving some of the propaganda that, like, so for instance, when you watch TV, Netflix, and whatever you watch, and a lot of this stuff is, like you said earlier, anti-African. How do you begin to curve some of those?
We need to read. Yeah. We need to read. If we don't like reading, get Audible. Go to some of our Black bookstores and purchase some of the DVDs and the lectures. I'm really not just talking about representation when I'm talking about books, right? Like, even when I'm talking about reading to our children and the people that we have around us, we understand that the way that we center our African way is through our lifestyle and our day-to-day experience, right? So I'm not saying like all of that stuff about like having a seat at the table or seeing somebody on TV. I'm saying make in your day-to-day life a manifestation of celebrating Blackness. So what you're listening to in music, what you're teaching your children, what are you eating, and doing, if you're doing homeschooling or unschooling, as my husband and I are, it's what are we choosing to center in these experiences. And so reading yourself and is chiefly important in re-Africanizing, participating in study groups, taking trainings by many of our brilliant folks. Dr. Joy DeGruy has a whole training that's all open to everybody around, healing post-traumatic slave syndrome. I have a whole training around decolonizing therapy for Black folk. I got whole healing spaces, right? Healing circles around helping sisters remember how to heal themselves. Whole platforms built out around what it means to reclaim our way of knowing. And so identifying those that we do trust, those that we have seen have a track record, and doing these things to constantly address our relationships, our perspective of self. And then, sisterhood and brotherhood, we need to be in healthy relationships where there is accountability at the forefront, right? And where the intention is liberation.
All right. Last question. Could you speak a little bit more about the training that you have, and just talk more about resources and healing circles that's out there for people? What is that? What is it? What it look like?
Okay, cool. All right. So what I offer a 16-hour semi-structured, self-paced training for folks that work in healing settings. So if you are a therapist, a mental health, you're a counselor, you're a doula, you are working for our people. I will soon open it to folks that are religious, folks like pastors, and folks that are simply working for the healing of our people. So you could be doing any work for Black folks, and I will open decolonizing therapy for Black folks to you. And what I unpack in that setting is the history of whitewashed wellness and the ways that it sought to extract the wisdoms of our brilliant African people and then whitewash it, and how the mental health system upholds racism and white supremacy within its system. And then I center and educate on the brilliance of Black psychology and Black social work, or African-centered social work, and African psychology, and I educate on these modalities. I sort of offer space for us to be able to unpack what Black folks need in the present day. How do we take the insights from the past, bring them in the modern time, in order to address these issues of race-based trauma, and really it's self-hatred. It's what many of our elders have been talking about for decades. And then the last aspect of that particular training is I share my framework, liberation-focused healing, as a eight tenets, eight characteristics that I think are necessary to ensure that Black folks get a therapy that liberates, or are in a healing space, and it honors the wisdoms of Black folks in Black psychology and African-centered social work, but it makes it really concrete. Like, this is what it looks like, let's do this, and this is what it looks like, and let's do this. Because what's been happening is we've gotten all this information, but we don't know how to apply it. So that's one. So that's decolonizing therapy for Black folks. The healing studio that I referenced that goes along with my book, Return to Presence, is called Return to Presence, a virtual healing studio. What that is literally a space where, if you are seeking a space to be able to better nourish yourself during this pandemic, and you need to be able to do it on your own time. A lot of us are juggling a lot of other things that certainly have become more complicated now during COVID. And so what is included in their experiences that I brought on 3 Black wellness professionals, a yoga instructor, a dance instructor, and a fitness instructor. And they monthly do live experiences that are centering our fortification and working for liberation, and how we do this work to heal ourselves and to fortify this work. You also get access to guided meditations by myself. You get mini courses that go along with the book that teach you, how do I use this family tree, or what I'm calling it, what we call the genogram, to actually do the work to heal my lineage. What kind of questions should I be asking? What kind of meditation can I do to be able to return to my body? What kind of things do I need to do to be able to listen to what my body has to say? How do I begin to ask these questions around the lineage traditions of my people? All of that is included within Return to Presence. And when it launches, it'll be in late this month. And so folks can get on the waiting list for both Decolonizing Therapy for Black folks and Return to Presence online on my website. And that's www.ShawnaMurray-Browne.com. And so you go to www.ShawnaMurray-Browne.com, or you follow me on Instagram at HealAssista, that's SISTA. You follow me on Facebook, Shawna Murray-Browne, LCSWC, as it shows up, or Kindred Community Healing, and that's when you'll get a lot of information. But to get on the wait list, you need to go to my website and click courses and put yourself there. Soon I will be launching, soon as in 2021. Huh?
Is that right?
What? Oh, yes. Good job. Soon I will be releasing I will be opening the space for the relaunch of the Healer Sister Project online, where it will be a 12-month experience, a healing space and sister circle for folks, for sisters to be able to really chart their own healing journey, centering a healing generationally, recognizing like, how do I get the self-care thing right? What is this thing with an ancestor altar? I don't know about my relationship with my mama. How do I, cultivate this from a perspective that amplifies my role as a mama or elder mama in community? All of that, you go to ShawnaMurray-Browne.com and you'll get it. Other healing circles. If you follow me on Kindred Community Healing, I actually share everybody's stuff. So if I see something that's for Black folks, like, I'm sharing it. There's an organization called BEAM, Black Emotional, I don't remember. It's BEAM. There's an organization called BEAM that often has these live events. There's a sister, Michelle Stafford. She Diva Yogi. She often offers free yoga. There's a sister, Camille Bionkwe, that teaches African dance. There's another sister, Dr. Muslima Ali, who be all about this fitness life. There's Baba, if you're here in Baltimore, there's a Baba who also teaches Qigong, Manifest Ra in DC. My teacher of Qigong teaches Qigong and centers the brothers. If you follow me, I share all of the Black people stuff because I am really clear that we need to prioritize our healing, and that when we do that, we literally change the game. There's Crystal Foreman that be educating us about food. Brother Dr. Yuma Bellamy be out here teaching. Listen, okay, like, get your herbalism on. Like, it's really about to sort of fortify and concretize what it means to do that work. I could go on, but I'm not.
So I'm forever grateful for you burning up my life. I appreciate it so much. Any final words we want to say about healing the Black community? Any wrap up or final words that you want to make?
Yeah, my final words would be this. Listen, it can be a lot. We've endured a lot as a people. If you're anything like me, right? Even in your personal life, like, we don't even have to go back 400 years. We only had to go back 50 years. You could just go back in the last 30 years of my life, and you've endured a powerful level of trauma. It's amazing that you're still here, beloved. And so the thing that I would have you know is, if you just take the right next step towards your healing, and you continue to just focus on healing and seeking and recommitting every day, you will literally transform our generations. And we need you in the game. I don't care if you're watching this and it seems like everything is falling apart, if you feel like you don't have nobody, don't nobody love you, like, if you just take the right next step, if you reach out, you take the right next step, your offspring in the future will be forever grateful. And so I got your back. Reach out to me if you need to. Oh, and last thing, soon I'll be releasing, so I'm gonna say this live because it's about to happen. Soon I will be launching my new online platform to find a therapist. Folks that have completed my training, Decolonizing Therapy for Black Folks, you will be able to visit my website. It's this is actually about to be a different one, but it's going to be on my website though. But the new website is www.therapythatliberates.com. www.therapythatliberates.com. We have folks from all over the world. You heard it, the whole wide world, y'all, that are preparing to create their profile. And so these, no matter if you in a whole real white space and ain't nobody Black over there, you can go to therapythatliberates.com and within the next couple weeks, and you'll find a cadre of folks that are clear about how to hold space for you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching. Make sure y'all stay tuned. I think our next discussion is on violence with Baba Imhotep on Friday.
Well, all right.
Appreciate you, sis.
Absolutely. Thank you.